She waited by the sea until her last breath. There is a place on the northern coast of Meridian Station where the tide comes in differently from everywhere else. It doesn't crash, it doesn't roar, it arrives quietly, almost carefully, as if it remembers something it is trying not to disturb. The researchers who work at the station call it the soft shore. They have never been able to explain why the water behaves differently there. They have sensors and models and decades of tidal data that offer no answer. So many of them, the ones who have been there long enough, have stopped trying to explain it. They just stand at the observation window sometimes, let Chiachi night and watch the water come in gentle and go out slow. And they feel, without being able to say why, that the ocean is mourning something. They are right. His name was Daniel Avery, 34 years Marine. Environmental researcher, old quiet, in the way that people who spend most of their time listening to the ocean tend to be quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that the most important things rarely announce themselves loudly. He came to Meridian Station on a 2-year research contract, studying deep current shifts in the post-warming Atlantic. He had a small room, a good coffee maker, and a habit of walking the soft shore at night after his data runs finished. Because the water there settled something in him he couldn't name. He never expected to find something settling back. The first time he saw her, he thought he was tired. The kind of tired that makes the brain generate shapes in dark water, a shimmer below the surface. Something turning, slow and deliberate, 30 meters from shore. He stood very still. The way he'd learned to stand still when the ocean was doing something he didn't understand. She surfaced only partially. Shoulders, the angles of a face, eyes that caught the moonlight in a way no human eye does not, reflecting it, but holding it, the way deep water holds light long after the sun has moved on. She looked at him for a long time. Then she went under without a sound. He stood there until the cold drove him back inside. He didn't sleep. He kept trying to find a rational explanation and kept arriving back at the same place that she had looked at him. The way someone looks at a person they have been thinking about for a very long time. She came back the next night. And the night after that, on the 4th night, she surfaced closer. Close enough that he could see the details of her face. Not human, not entirely alien, but somewhere in that rare space between familiar and impossible. Her skin held a faint luminescence, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Her movements had the fluid economy of something that had never once fought against the water, only ever moved with it. He sat on the rocks. She floated at the edge of the tidal zone, and they stayed like that for an hour. Not speaking, not needing to, in the particular comfortable silence of two beings who have somehow recognized each other before they've had the chance to meet. He called her Sella. She gave him a sound, low and resonant, that his vocal cords couldn't form. So he offered the nearest human syllable, and she accepted it with a patience that made him feel both inadequate and deeply seen. Language came slowly and beautifully. She learned his words the way children learn, with no embarrassment, with total attention, repeating them into the water as if offering them back to the ocean for safekeeping. He learned hers the way you learn music, not by understanding it, but by feeling the places where it changed. She asked him once, in the mixture of sounds and gestures and borrowed words that had become their language, what it felt like to be made of something that could dry out. He told her it felt like being permanently aware that you needed to find your way back to something. She went very quiet at that. Then she said, in the closest words she had, "We are the same." Then he fell in love with her the way the tide moves, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the steady, returning rhythm of it. Every night, back to the same shore. Every night, the same certainty that this was where he was supposed to be. She fell in love with him the way her people understood love as a permanent orientation, the way a current runs always in one direction, the way certain deep water channels hold their course across thousands of miles of ocean floor, unwavering, beyond the reach of surface storms. She did not understand human time. He tried to explain it to her, the way it was divided and measured and worried over. She listened with her head tilted, water moving around her shoulders, and then she said, "Why do you cut something that flows?" He didn't have an answer for that. He wrote it in his notebook that night and sat with it for a long time. They had 11 months. He knew, when the contract renewal came, that he had to return to the mainland for 60 days. A funding review, institutional obligations, the bureaucratic architecture of a life that had been built before he understood what waiting by the soft shore each night was going to mean. He told her on a night when the ocean was completely still, no wind, the surface like dark glass. She listened without interrupting, which was how she always listened fully, giving everything in her attention. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked if 60 days was long. He said it wasn't, that it would pass like a tide, that he would count everyone and come back before she had finished counting them herself. She reached out and placed her hand briefly against his chest, over his heart. It was the most physical contact they had ever shared. Her skin was cooler than the air. Her fingers were longer than human fingers, webbed faintly at the base, and they rested against him with extraordinary gentleness, feeling the beat beneath the bone. "Come back to me," she said. In his words, learned perfectly. "I will always come back to you," he said. Always. The water accepted his promise. She held it in her eyes. And then she slipped below the surface, and the soft shore was quiet again, and the tide came in the way it always did, gentle and careful and slow. He never made it back. On the 43rd day, on a coastal road in the rain, a vehicle failure, a barrier, a drop, the kind of random, senseless, small catastrophe that the universe produces with devastating ease and no explanation, he survived, but barely. And then slowly, and then in a hospital room 200 miles from the ocean, with tubes and monitors and the specific fluorescent quiet of a place where time moves at the speed of recovery, Daniel Avery spent his days trying to get back to something he could not reach. He asked for updates on his research station. He asked if anyone could send word. He asked in the confused, urgent way of someone who knows that somewhere a promise is waiting for them and the distance is costing something they cannot afford. He did not know what it was costing. She came to the soft shore on the 44th day, and the 45th. And every day after that, she would surface at the place where he always sat, on the rocks at the edge of the tidal zone, and she would wait. She would watch the path from the research station to the shore. She would listen for footsteps. The researchers noticed her. Some of them, the careful ones, understood enough not to interfere. They watched from the observation window. They kept quiet. They felt the weight of something happening that they had no language for. She began to weaken slowly. Her people were not made for the shallows, not for the long hours in exposed tidal zones, under sun and wind, against rocks that scratched rather than yielded. Her luminescence dimmed. Her movements slowed, but she did not leave. She had made a calculation that was not a calculation. It was simpler than that. It was, he said he would come back, so she would be where he could find her. The ocean understood. It kept sending the tide gently, the way you bring water to someone who cannot move. The water came in soft and went out slow, as if it too was waiting, as if the whole sea had organized itself around the vigil of one small being on a northern shore, who had learned about love from a human and taken the lesson more seriously than the lesson had ever been meant to be taken. She lasted 91 days. At Chesapeake Point, the researchers couldn't say exactly when. She simply lying at the edge of the water, half submerged, the tide moving around her with the same impossible gentleness it had always shown at the soft shore. She was still facing the path from the station, still watching for him. When Daniel Avery finally came back, recovered, broken in a different way, carrying the guilt of a promise he had not been able to keep, the shore was empty. The researchers told him quietly, carefully, in the way you tell someone something they already know somewhere they cannot bear to look. He sat on the rocks for a long time. The tide came in and moved around him and went back out. And if you listen at the soft shore now, on still nights, when the water arrives quietly and the moon holds its light just above the surface, you can hear something that the sensors cannot measure and the models cannot explain. A name, carried by the tide, gentle as a hand placed over a heartbeat. Coming in, going out, returning, always returning. The way he promised he would.